o'clock, 7:30, 7:50.
Okay.
So these alarms will go off, Carol will
Turn them off and then.
turn them off and make a noise.
Okay. Just raise your hands. I mean, I don't know. It seems kind of formal for just such a small group. That's the
Well,
other thing. I just want to point that out.
You know,
Yeah.
we may roll this differently, but it seems like those kinds of time
Yeah, we should adhere to some
slices,
schedule, of
yeah.
course. Yeah, of
So
course.
that we're
Yeah.
talking about the regular things.
We might get through it faster too, because you know how.
Yeah, we might.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, very good. Rochester Judge. Wherever you're hanging out. Yeah. Hi, Bill. Belinda Quesada. Or this evening. Which one?
I'm not hearing anything off this mic. I'm not hearing anything yet? Yeah, we should have started 5 minutes ago, in fact. Still nothing? Bing, bing. Okay. We didn't take a sound test on this early on?
We did.
We did. Oh,
We did.
well, okay. Let's. Hey, Derek.
Testing 1, 2.
Okay.
I
think
am
we're
on, right? Testing my mic. Testing 1. I know. Earlier it worked.
There
Okay,
you
now
go.
it's working. Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Rob. Welcome, everyone. This is a wonderful turnout. We're really pleased. I mean, we always want more people to come to the table or come to the arrangement here. But we're very happy that you're here. You took time out of your day. You're curious. We hope that you'll leave here with some good answers. My name is Belinda Quesada. I'm moderating. We are live streaming. I work at KCXU as a host and producer. It's more like podcasting, but we're located in San Jose, and it's a great little radio station to be a part of. I want to thank our techs, audio techs, Tim and Elise. Thank you very much. We are there with Social Ground Foundation, and we're live streaming on YouTube at youtube.com/@MilpitasPRT. So thank you to everybody, and of course, if you're not able to see it live streaming, those of you who are not in the room, you'll be able to pick it up at some other point if you go to Social Ground Foundation on YouTube. Or YouTube, I'm sorry, youtube.com/MilpitasPRT. And we'll have that, Rob, on the website as well, on your Milpitas PRT website. Very good. Okay, welcome. We want to just go ahead and we put it in the idea of being transparent about all of this and just keeping everybody on the same page. We have listed everything here. I won't go over the rules. You know, I think we're mature and we got that. We know not to eat and all that sort of thing. You know where the restrooms are located, so those housekeeping things I won't bore you with. We'd like to just kick in. Rob is our secretary at LoopWorks and the genius behind a lot of this, along with his team of 5 people at LoopWorks. And I want to, how do I get that to move forward?
That, you mean go down this way?
Yeah, oh, you're in charge of that. Thank you.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay. So the common agreements that we have that we just want to make clear that I think everybody in this room is familiar with are understanding that climate crisis is worsening quickly, and we agree that shifting 10% of trips to public transit could substantially reduce CO2 emissions. The BART borough is expected to cost roughly $12 billion. Hard to imagine. The BART borough completion date of 2037 is well past when dramatic reductions in CO2 emissions are required. VTA operations are currently funded with revenue from 4 voter-enacted local sales tax initiatives, the 1976 sales tax, the 2000 Measure A sales tax, 2008 Measure B sales tax, and the 2016 Measure B sales tax that account for 80% of VTA's operating budget revenues. And going forward, the VTA has the authority to redirect funding scheduled for the BART borough, and they're unlikely to do so without an alternative example to see and ride. So we want more and better public transit. I think we're all in agreement with that, right? That's why we're here. We're going to find out a little bit more about this discussion. So we started out with the open fishbowl format, but it looks like just in the interest of time and friendliness, we're going to just leave it as it is now, where people are just seated. And Rob, do I have an agreement with that? Is that okay?
That's
We
fine.
just veer a little bit and just, okay, good.
I would,
Yeah, thank you.
I would point out that we do have a couple of representatives here for the interests of the environment.
Yes.
That's Jonathan Karpf. And Hal here is going to be representing transit users.
Okay,
So
very
if we
good.
do step
So
on
that
their
is the
toes,
inner
I
circle.
expect
Okay.
them to let us know that
Okay,
we're
very
going out
good.
of bounds.
And thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. And we also want to hear from anyone in the community that's out in the audience that has an interest in speaking up. Yes, yes, Carol.
So does it mean that if you don't have to take the open seat in order to ask a question, you can just raise your hand? Is that what you mean?
I'm okay with that. Rob, are you okay with that? Okay, very
Okay,
good. Initially,
thanks.
it was going to work where you had the person seated here, but since we're a small, intimate group, I think it probably works best that way.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Good question. Okay. 640, where we are and how we got here. This is the per capita transit ridership in the region actually fell between 12% in 1991 and 2016. In 2020, COVID hit, which caused ridership to plummet. Although rising again, it still remains below the 2019 levels. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which oversees the entire Bay Area, issued a report and plan for recovery entitled Survive and Thrive, a Roadmap to Sustainable Business Model for Bay Area Public Transit, May 24, 2023. It outlines a path supported by MTC and the region's transit operators to adapt the Bay Area's transit system to a new sustainable business model and aims to grow ridership. Unfortunately, it does not mention advanced transit technologies like personal rapid transit. Also, the panel looks a lot like we have, including big subsidies for taxpayers. The state-level measure SB 1031 to address impending financial crisis across the Bay Area was sidelined, and there is no pickup plan for the critical services provided for public transit. Here in Santa Clara County, Valley Transportation Authority, or VTA, continues moving forward with the $12 billion mega project that won't address our congestion and climates until 2037 or later if we can pay for it. Okay, we are going with those assumptions and those facts. same page. I did not mention that we have a few dignitaries in the audience, and I'd like to do that now. And forgive me for going off script here a little bit. But running for mayor, Ms. Hong Lin. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, welcome. And we have, let's see. Oh, I just took his name. Where did I put it?
It's Bill Chuan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rob. Bill Chon.
Chuan.
Chon. Chon. Thank you. Welcome. I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. Thank you. Welcome. And good luck to both of you. Okay. Did I miss anyone in the crowd? That should be not. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Derek Grasty, Board President, Mount Pleasant School District, also representing South Bay Progressive Alliance.
Thank you. Welcome, Derek Gradsky. Thank you. Okay, great. Anyone else that I may have left off? Okay, yes, sir. Yes.
They always
Thank
forget.
you.
Yeah, I
Thank
sent
you.
Rod, they always forget.
We saw you last
I have the
month when
different
you came.
letter at the end of my name. That's the reason why they do that, don't they? I'm Bob Brunton. I'm running for State Assembly, which if you want to improve transportation in the Bay Area, it's going to have to come with a solid direction from the State Assembly.
Okay, good. Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad everyone's here because it takes a village. Okay, now let's go.
Now, we also have people
Sorry.
representing various organizations, companies, groups. Did anybody want to introduce themselves and say who they're representing?
Yes,
Brett?
thank you. We'll pass you the mic.
Sure. I'm Brett Garrett. I'm with Santa Cruz PRT.
Is the camera right there?
Hi, Ron Swenson. I wear a couple hats. I organize the Podcar City conferences under the nonprofit International Institute of Sustainable Transportation. And in addition to that, we have a program which was earlier today, for example, at San Jose State once a week with mechanical engineering students in their senior year doing a capstone project that's called the Spartan Superway.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, Spartan stands for Solar Powered, Automated, Rapid Transit, Ascendant Networks.
That's great. I like that. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Okay, welcome. And Professor Karp? Did we hear from Professor Karp? We did. Okay, thank you.
I'll be representing the environmental groups. Right.
Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome.
Hey, my name is Hal. I'll be representing user transport.
Yes.
Transit users.
Transit users,
transit
yes.
users.
Excellent. Thank you, Hal. Welcome also. Did we leave anyone out? Because we don't mean to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Steve Hamilton. God, it's been almost 10 years now. I founded an organization called citytram.org, which was patterned after Code for America. I don't know if anybody knows about them, but they find the best software developers in the world and pair them with governments that need software tools and help them develop them. So I had the same idea for transit and attempted to do it for transit.
Yes.
It didn't work all that well because turns out transit agencies aren't really doing development. So CityTram evolved over the time to be an advocacy organization, and then CityTram PRT is an independent developer of the technology.
Thank you. Welcome. Very good. Everyone's okay, accounted for here. Thank you very much. All right, moving forward. We're on 7 p.m. How's our time?
I think we're good.
7, okay. Oh, amazing. Okay, options moving forward, Daniel Bornstein. Should I actually read this, Rob, or should we let the group read? I mean, silently, of course, but to keep up. Your thoughts?
The streaming audience is not be able to read this, I don't think, so
Oh,
you
that's
should probably go ahead and read it
right.
aloud.
Of course. Okay.
Too bad Daniel's not here to read it himself.
Yes, okay. Yeah, Daniel Bornstein, Bay Area News Group opinion editor, wrote his opinion that was editorialized in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Quote, as costs keep rising and VTA transparency remains abysmal, the BART extension should be subjected to complete and rigorous independent review. But it's become clear that VTA leaders are not about to let that happen, close quote. As leaders of the Milpitas Advanced Transit Project, Loop Works wants a public conversation about the future of BART-Caltrain connection. Out of this conversation, we may be able to find sustainable solutions to our transportation and transit problems. Can you scooch that a bit further up? That way I don't have to read directly from, yeah, just,
Yeah, but,
it says some transit rule, thank you, just a little bit lower.
Yeah, but I don't think I can do that.
Oh, I see, okay,
It's okay.
all right. No, pick it up here. Oh, good, oh, thank you. We have another guest. Give me a moment and I'll be right with you to have her introduce herself, okay?
Okay.
As a lead, just to keep us on track here. As a leader of Milpitas Advanced Transit Project, Loop Works wants a conversation. Okay, I read that. Some transit rules of thumb to know are headways. The time between buses or train arrivals must be 10 minutes or less to attract a moderate level of riders. Transit intended, I'm sorry, lost my place. Transit intended for short distance travel should be frequent, and transit intended for longer distance travel can be less frequent and generally is used less. In terms of rider priorities, the fare box price of public transportation comes well after reliability, punctuality, frequency, comfort, security, and geographical coverage. Yes, the price comes after all of these other factors is importance. Given our current situation, who would like to start our discussion of possible solutions? Big. Oh, good. Thank you, Professor.
You're pointing at me?
Rob, before we go forward, do we want to introduce our guest that just came in? That
Yes, Anu, would you like to
someone
introduce
indicated?
yourself
Thank you.
as a candidate?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anu Naka. I'm currently serving as a Milpitas Unified School District Board Trustee, and I'm running for the City Council of Milpitas, the candidate.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in case we forget, it's on your T-shirt, so that's great. That's a good idea, huh? Okay, very good. Rob Means, our Secretary of Loop Works. This is your show. We want to thank you for getting us all together here. Let's talk transportation.
Let's. So if the VTA was represented here and they turned us down, they would talk about probably the value to the whole Bay Area of having a rail connection all around the Bay. And they would talk about the value of these new stations and how it's going to serve the downtown area with these 4 stations. They'd say that's great, and they're going to get the money to do it, but I can't totally speak for them. That's just my guess is what they would say. I've had other people approach me and say, well, gee, Rob, why don't we just put in some buses, some electric buses, and have that working between the 2 stations. VTA already does that. They've got buses going every roughly 10 to 12 minutes between the 2 stations, so that link is actually already in place and working for us. But there's limitations to that particular option. As much as I like electric buses, they're still big, they're still in the midst of traffic, and they're still stopping and stopping and stopping and stopping and going all the way down between the 2 different, the origin station and your destination station. So if you look at the schedule of what the bus is doing between the 2 stations, you'll notice that early in the morning it takes about, I think I read it was something in the neighborhood of about 15, 16 minutes. I think it was 16 minutes. At 5 p.m. and at 8 o'clock in the morning at the traffic jamming times, you have to add on 5 or 6 minutes to that because not only do you have the stops in between, but now you've got traffic that's congesting the area and making it more difficult for quick transit between our two major transit hubs. So those are two of the options. People would also talk about light rail. If we did a light rail system, it would probably have to be elevated, and the elevated system that they're putting in that connects Eastridge with the BART Berryessa station, which is about 2.5 miles long, is running at about $250 million per mile, per bidirectional mile. So the cost, hey, that is doable, and frankly, it's actually a lot cheaper than $12 billion if you add it up, because it's really only about 3 or 4 miles between the stations. If it's $250 million a mile, you're really only talking about $1 billion for an elevated LRT system that serves those stops along the way. Which brings us to PRT as an option. There, you don't have stops along the way. And there's no transfers if that's in the equation for people. The other thing that we could actually do with $1 billion worth of PRT is to cover an area. Rather than just having corridors that have stops along that line, we can actually spread things out, cover 10 square miles with 8 stations per square mile. So if we've got 10 square miles, we're talking about 80 stations, kind of blanketing that whole area between the BART transit station and the Caltrain Diridon station, which of course includes all of the downtown area. We think that that makes a lot more sense than the other 3 options that we're currently considering. I'm going to leave it at that and see if the environmental folks and the transit users have anything to say.
Yeah, I agree. It makes a lot more sense because both frequency of use would go up compared to the other alternatives. And given the fact that the federal government's largesse was $1 billion short of the money needed, I think that 2037 is optimistic for the completion of the BART to Diridon extension. And given the climate crisis, if we wait that long, it's too late, just too late. And so this would get people out of their cars, and it would be a much more efficient and a much more user-friendly system to connect the terminus of the BART line with Diridon. That's why I support it.
So as a student that I've used public transport before, primarily buses, and when there are high traffic hours, not just on the road, but also in bus users, where it takes more time for users to get on and off the bus, let alone sometimes if in the worst case that if there are too many users and too many cars on the road, sometimes the buses would just pass you altogether, which is really unfortunate because instead of waiting the already long 16 minutes, you end up having to wait half an hour just to get to, you know, a couple miles down the block.
Rob's heard me say this before, and it sounds like a broken record. I think the major problem with transit that this report talks about is the governing structure. We have 27 agencies in the Bay Area, okay? And they don't work well together. And of those 27, only 2 have elected boards. And I may be the only one in this room who gets to actually get a chance to vote. Because you see, I live in Fremont, okay? And I live in very southern Fremont, so I'm close to Milpitas, right off Sky Creek Road. But understand the 2 elected boards are AC Transit and BART. And when it comes to BART, you don't get to have an election down here in Santa Clara County because you're dependent on my vote in Fremont, who I choose to be the BART director of the Fremont area, who's going to help sort of make decisions for you down here with the $1 billion you're spending, okay? And that's crazy nuts, right? So that's the reason why I'm I mean, I can put my political plug, but that's why I keep running for state assembly, is I talk about we need to coordinate, consolidate, and make them accountable. And so the first thing we're going to have to do is we have to change the governing structure, because AC Transit doesn't do stupid things like the light rail, and, you know, and running around Oakland. You know, they just run buses. They know it's going to work. And today I had an event in the city of Newark, which is in my assembly district, in this assembly district as well, and the #1 mass transit program really for the entire Bay Area would be the Dumbarton Bridge right-of-way project. Because talking about cost savings connecting Union City BART to Redwood City Caltrain using the old tracks would eliminate a ton of traffic coming down all this way down here to Milpitas. 237 becomes less used, 101 becomes less, 880 becomes less, and it would stop in East Palo Alto and Newark, which were the lowest cost areas. Anyway, it's a good program. But the first thing I think we have to do is consolidate, coordinate, and account these, make them accountable. And so somehow we have to turn this 7-member BART board, which 3 of the 7 are in San Francisco. So that's even dumber, because when the system was first started, okay, so because you have to tell San Francisco you have to get rid of 2 of your trustees, move one out to Antioch, you know, because that's out now in the East Bay, and then you're going to have to add one down here, right? Because, okay, so I can imagine San Francisco's not going to like that too much. Okay, so you have you have these problems, and there's not, and of course, no one talks about the other side of the water, you know, which is, because the other magic of BART, which the other thing that you like about BRT, is it's the only system that does not share the road. Understand the magic of BART, it's irrelevant to the traffic around it. It's like going on the monorail in Disneyland, right? But the VTA is always interacting with cars. And every once in a while you hear about people dying on the tracks in Caltrain, right? And now with electric ones, they're going to be faster, so they'll just get hit faster and harder, okay? Because they don't really do much about changing people walking on the tracks. So those are things we have to focus in, I think, on mass transit versus I think these reports talk about change the governing structure, because then you can work on last mile. You can talk about the research. You can talk about handling for the consumers, because right now these agencies don't care about the rider. They care about you follow the cash flow, and you'll find a tremendous amount of money to the vendors. And file any BART election, and you're going to see it's the vendors who are the huge donors to the campaigns, because they want, you know, because they want either use their stuff. So it's amazing how they want to keep things in control too. So you have to change the governing structure, and it has to come from Sacramento to kind of say, hey, knuckleheads, it's time to rethink transit in the Bay Area.
Do I have audio? Oh, thank you. Sorry, thank you, Tim. I think that's reflected in the turnout, in the fact that we don't have anyone representing that governance structure, because of that very fact that there's, well, I don't know how to say this.
No accountability
Yeah.
was the word that Bob
and
used.
also too many agencies. 27 is, like, the consensus is ridiculous. I mean, it'd be difficult on a good day.
One of my good friends, who's Suds, who's a city council member in Santa Clara, and now he says, hey, Suds, you're now on the dark side, because now you're talking about making sure the city of Santa Clara has the best transit system. Okay, that's the basic problem. That's the reason why if you have a dedicated elected board whose whole focus is let's make transit work for the Bay Area, because the reality is, so I can tell you, like, I live in Fremont, but I spent a lot of time in Milpitas. Most people don't know that I went over to Mountain View. Maybe I'm going to work. I mean, this is a Bay Area problem, not a parochial city problem. Right. And that's it. You're never going to fix it without fixing that core problem.
Rob, is that how you see it? Thank you.
Not really. So I agree with Bob that we have a lot of transit agencies. They are not playing well together. Mm-hmm. He's probably right. It's because there's not a lot of accountability. They're insulated from voters for the most part. And that could explain why down here in VTA, which does have a large pool of space and a large group of technologies that they're using, they are still not creating the kind of service that users are looking for. that would be, convenient and quick. So, yeah, we could get value from doing something about consolidating, but is that really where the problem is? Because I'm starting to think it's really a technology problem. Because all these agencies are thinking in terms of mass transit, not small transit vehicles. And when they think in terms of mass transit, they're thinking in terms of corridors for the most part. Now, buses are a little bit different, because buses actually is a network system that serves an area. But to get to places in that area, you really have to take multiple buses, generally speaking. And that's when we start getting into transfers. So not only do we have the slowness from multiple stops or the slowness from being stuck in traffic, but we've also got the slowness added on from when they actually have to make a transfer onto another line to get to where they're going. But at least buses cover an area rather than simply a corridor. And I think that's the main objection I have to the mass transit solutions that VTA has been offering, is that we have a sprawl in our South Bay area here that corridors simply don't work very well for it. Really, we need a network kind of an area that covers the area, or at least a good chunk of it. And that's where PRT may come into play.
So let me see if I follow that logic. Would PRT, the personal rapid transit, that LoopWorks is in favor of, which is this Milpitas corridor connection of all the stops, 80 plus stops, very ambitious. Do we still look at that the same? Because is that, to my mind, it seems like is part of a governance problem, that, I mean, finances, getting acquisitions, the easement approvals, all of the things we need for the infrastructure to make it happen. Is that still in competition with BART and the reason why we're here, BART, Connection, and Caltrain? They're very different. So I'm not sure what my question is, other than it seems like this is a no-brainer. Like, we could get this if we had all the approval and all the permits in place and money and all of that. So it's just such a huge step.
Well, if we're talking about the connection between BART Berryessa and Caltrain, Diridon stations, yes, we're talking about something that's substantially larger than what we're proposing here in Milpitas. We're talking about doing a real small dual loop system that serves a high density area that is sliced and diced by 2 creeks, 2 major roadways. We're talking 6 and 8 lanes here, and a couple of rail lines. All of these divide this metro area of Milpitas. And if we could rise above all of that and provide a system that connects that basically 1.5 square miles quickly and easily, and allows people to get to and from the BART transit hub, which is BART, LRT, and the bus depot
perfect,
there,
yeah.
that would help everybody that wants to use transit in this zone. Once we had done that, then the folks at VTA or in San Jose could take a look and say, okay, does this technology make sense financially and customer-wise? You know, are the users really excited about it, or are they avoiding it like they avoid the buses? Once we got answers to those questions, it would be a lot easier to decide, well, gee, do we want to connect Caltrain and BART using this technology? And if so, do we want to stick with just corridors? Or do we want to start spreading these corridors out so that we've actually covering an area?
Your proposal, if I read it correctly, it's a free ride, essentially, in this loop.
That's our starting game plan for this area here in Milpitas. We expect that once we expand the system, then to go out of this initial startup dual loop system, going out of that or coming into it, people would be charged. And from that, we should be able to actually pay for the operations and maintenance, because we're not paying for drivers. It's an automated, computer-controlled system, and it would be different from most transit agencies where they're paying 60, 70, 80 cents of their operating dollars are going towards people. just like, here in Milpitas or in, in city government or in the school district, most of the money is going towards people to get things done, and then the remaining 10, 20, 30% is going into material and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a real possibility for us, is to have a low operating costs for the system once it's built. There's no question it's going to cost something substantial to get it built in the first place. But I believe that the payoff in terms of customer service and the subsequent customer demand will more than justify the initial cost of building the system.
Not to mention the fact that we're going to be contributing to our environment by taking people off the roads and out of their cars. And yeah, it's hard to bike in this area. It's hard to get around on foot. It's a little bit easier on foot, but it's just it is a diverse loop here. I mean, I've seen living in San Jose, but visiting here many times. I hope it works out. I think we should open it up a little bit to the group at large. We'd like to hear from you, and we just have the mic as a mechanism for us to hear better. So if you're not comfortable, hopefully you'll be comfortable holding the mic and answering. But can we just like to hear, thank you, from those in the audience.
Okay, so this is Mr. City Tram. So the topic of today's discussion has to do with the connection between the Berryessa BART station and the Dearden hub, right? There's a plan in place, represented by BTA's plan to extend BART and close that loop. Underground, I believe, most of it. It's ridiculously expensive. It's already behind schedule by, I don't know, 5 to 6 years at least, and it looks like that's going to go on for a while. My analysis says that the fundamental problem is the reason it's taken this long is because they spent all this time raising the money because it's so expensive.
To go underground?
12 billion now? Is that what 12 billion is the estimate? Is that to go 4 miles? 6 miles. Okay. Wow. Only 2 billion per mile. Right? Now, unfortunately, this is not strange. If you spend any time at all and go look at mass transit projects around this country for the last 40 years, you will find they are ridiculously expensive, they are disruptive to the local community, they are behind schedule, and once finally completed, their ridership is below what was estimated, and they are not economically viable. And that's why it takes so long to raise the money, because no private investor is interested. They have to go to Uncle Sam and say, gimme, 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 right? And jump through all those hoops that the Uncle Sam provides, and that's why it takes so long. What's the whole BART thing where they got the federal funding, 3 years ago, and they've been trying to fill in the rest that they need for the last few years? What are they doing, spending all their time doing? Wandering around Sacramento, trying to get people to support it and give them the money. Now, the state has money problems also, and the Fed's going to have some really ugly ones coming up in about 3 or 4 months. So why do we keep thinking we can go to Uncle Sam and Uncle Sam is going to keep giving it to us and we can waste it, which is what they're doing. Because if you do the financial analysis on mass transit projects, the National Association of Public Transit Agencies puts out a fact book every year. The average speed for a bus system varies between about, depending on what city you're in, 12 and 14 miles per hour. The cost per mile is about just under $5, $4.94 per mile of vehicle. Yeah, per passenger mile. Yes, you're right, per passenger mile. Now you compare that to a car, which is about 75 cents. Now with insurance going up, it's probably closer to 80 to 90 cents now per mile. But cars are on demand. I don't have to wait. They average in the city close to, suburb areas, 20, 21 miles an hour or so. So you want 21 or you want 12? Do you want 70, 80, maybe 90 cents a mile? You want $4.94? People do what makes sense. That's why there's no riders, because mass transit does not work. The architecture of mass transit does not work. But it's been captured by the industry, right? So the public transit financing system has been captured by the mass transit industry, which is what our assembly candidate was telling us and explaining in some detail just a couple of minutes ago. And so when they put out a bid for a solution to this problem, they've already decided what the solution is. It's a mass transit thing. Do they want the rubber-tired bus box kind of thing, or do they want the light rail thing, or do they want the BART thing, right? Heavy rail, right? But they've already decided what the answer is, and it's the wrong answer. But it's not about coming up with the right answer. It's about the excuse to get the funds, because all those funds are going to be wasted, but they're going to be wasted in my community. So what it is a public welfare system, or an urban welfare system. And that's why nobody really cares about the technology, and does the technology solve the problem or not?
That's depressing.
Right? So until you basically, you know, I mean, unfortunately, you got to tear something down before you can build something to replace it. So we're not.
What's the answer? Yeah.
We're not going to get an opportunity to do what makes sense until we get rid of what doesn't make sense. I tried to get in with Buttigieg when he first took an office and stuff and was not successful, but I had a series of proposals. The lead proposal was no more transit grants. They're low interest or zero interest loans. The thing has to make sense and make money. It has to support itself. It's got a 40-year life or the life of the infrastructure, whichever is shorter, right? Suddenly those transit agency decision makers are going to have to think about, we're going to have to pay this money back. Can this thing support it? Otherwise they won't be able to build it.
I don't know of any transit agency in America that operates at a profit, that is not dependent on taxpayers. You do. Tell us about this.
And at least it used to, until they got a little bit too wonky. So for mass transit to work at a profit level, it has to go to where people want to go, to where they are, okay? And it has to be used as many hours a day as possible, okay? And tourists as well as regular people. So that was your clue. The one that was running at profit was the city of Las Vegas because of McCarran and the Strip. Okay, so the Strip was both a place for the tourists and the workers. The casino said, don't park here, come in. The people on the Strip said, one go from one end of the Strip, the other end of the Strip. Now, McCarran Airport was the one fighting back, saying, because the taxi people didn't really like the idea, but that was the cold nut, was to get a guy connected to McCarran, the convention centers, the hotels, and then bring it out to the spokes. And that made sense. And they didn't use, and they used a lot of buses. They rarely used really weird stuff. And they would have specialized lanes, because partly what you're going to have to do to combat traffic is at least the bus has to have its place where it can get back and forth within 10 minutes, so when the traffic gets higher. But so Vegas sort of worked, okay, until they made it a little fancier, but it was running at a profit, and it runs pretty close to that now. So they didn't get fancy with technology, and it's used 24 hours a day. So that sort of made sense.
So that is almost an example that proves the rule, because you've got a very unique situation where you've got things are operating 24/7 in Vegas, if I recall correctly. And you're right, you've got, you know, a high density spot and a very popular destination at McCarran Airport. So
A dedicated lane, maybe that's
yeah.
part of it too.
And I would like to argue with you though about federal money. I'm anticipating that there's going to be a big Democratic win, and that they're going to go back and they're going to legislate and they're going to start pumping money out to infrastructure projects and dump a lot of it into transportation projects, including transit. What say you to that?
We're broke. And the last budget deal, the credit limit, you know, how every 6 months or so we have the debt ceiling has to be extended. The last deal got it to February of 2025. So it doesn't matter who wins. We've got a debt ceiling issue coming in February 2025
For the state of California?
for the nation.
For the nation.
Okay, I want to underline the point the gentleman made, the assembly candidate. So I did this, last time I did this was February of 2019, but you can do it anytime you want. If you get federal money, you have a transit project, then you're required to provide data to them for the National Transit Database. You can go to the DOT website, you can pick any month you want, you can download the spreadsheet. So I did it in February 2019, and then you filter the spreadsheet using a Excel sort. I decided I wanted only urban areas that had reasonable ridership, which I defined as 3,000 riders a day or more. And then I sorted by the fields I was interested in to look at which ones were profitable, self-sustaining, right? There were 8. There were 2270 some to the almost 2,300 mass transit projects that were built over the last 40 years and are operating today in the cities across America. And of those, 8 paid for themselves. So of course I was really interested. Wow, 8? What are these? What's the magic answer? And I went and investigated the 8. So 3, one is actually at 0. It's not profitable or losing. It's just, it breaks even, okay? 3 are bus systems that operate at universities where there's a captive market, right? You got like a split campus out in the middle of nowhere and kids just got to ride it. So they can charge basically whatever they want. Usually it's fed into the deal with the tuition and stuff, but it lets the transit service itself operate at break even or better, right? 3 were ferries. No bridge to the island. The only way to get there is the ferry. So basically a captive environment where you can charge enough to make it pay for itself, right? Now, the other 2 and the one that was break even were all automated systems. The Vegas monorail is one of them. And they were all products of the early days of UMTA R&D. Morgantown, Virginia is one of them. Right?
I'm saying because that is a PRT-like system there. So GRT is larger vehicles, but it's been running for 50 years, and you say they're actually profitable.
And is that a college campus? 50 years, that's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
So the campus is split into 2 pieces, and the downtown is between. It's available to students and public.
Super. Okay.
So I was always operating under the assumption that if we convince VTA to go with the PRT, that the money that's already been expended for the extension could be used to build the system. Where would the money come from for the pilot project in Milpitas? Would that come from the city? Would it?
So when we started this about 5 years ago and wrote up our business plan, we were operating under the assumption that climate solution, which is what we're talking about offering here, would be real popular with, say, foundations that are trying to do good in the world, particularly those that are focusing on climate solutions, which, oh, by the way, is only about 2% of the money that foundations are shoveling out the door goes to climate solutions. But that turned out really not to be the case. They didn't seem to be interested because when we approached them, the few that we could approach, because most of them say, don't call us, we'll call you, we'll find out through our own networks what is worth investing in. But we had a backup plan. If that didn't work, we'd go out to investors because based on the numbers for this particular technology that we're talking about, which is lighter weight and less expensive than, say, the Glideways project. And just kind of as an aside to kind of give you a feel for this, Glideways are initially thought that they can connect Diridon Station with the airport at under $500 million. They're starting to realize that that is not realistic. And I believe, I haven't heard them say anything to explain why they think it's going to cost more than they originally anticipated. I believe that the situation is that they've realized they cannot have it on the ground in dedicated right-of-ways as they anticipated, that they're going to have to move a lot of it elevated. And once you start moving something elevated, it gets to be about twice as expensive as putting it at ground level. So I think that's what's happened with them. They've got 2,000-pound vehicles. It takes much more to put stuff up in the air when it's 2,000 pounds than when it's 1,000 pounds, which is what our vehicles weigh. So I think I lost track of the original question. The money for the Milpitas. So investors, our guys that actually designed our system, and it's a group of engineers operating on their own, doing a open source design out of Minnesota of all places. They ran some numbers and they said, okay, if we cover, say, 9 square miles with PRT and we've got this many stations and we expect to get this much percentage of the ridership attracted away from cars, then we can charge this particular amount of money, which is a reasonable charge for a fare, and make not only a profit, but a profit that not only pays for the operation and maintenance of the system as it's built, once it's built, but also pays back the capital investment to build it in the first place. That's what we really need if we want to get to where Bob and, well, many taxpayers want to get. We want a system that pays for itself. How are we going to do it when Milpitas is doing it for free? We're going to either change the rules of the game ultimately or change the configuration. I'm expecting that we'll change the configuration by adding on more and more of Milpitas. If we can have a system grow to cover 10 square miles of Milpitas, we should be able to break even and make a profit. We can probably do it even easier because we're expecting to have somebody outside the city, somebody outside of our company, pay for the capital investment in the first place, particularly for this demonstration system that we're talking about building, because out of that will come a treasure trove of information about costs, viability, difficulties, problems, things that we hadn't anticipated, both good and bad. And then expanding the system will simply, as with any network, each additional station that you add is not 1 over however many stations you had, but because it's a network, you actually get more than 1 over. So we're expecting that the value of the system will continue to grow, and as it does, then we will actually be charging folks going in and out of this free zone. So we're actually talking about having a free zone here. How we're going to pay for it, I don't frankly know at the moment. I expect that part of our funding sources initially will actually cover the first few years of funding to make sure that we get decent, solid data so that we know what the heck is going on here. Right. Is there an investor group out there that's willing to pay for it? If so, we haven't found it, and we reached out to about 3 dozen of them. So then we started looking at both the federal and the state governments. And the federal government doesn't seem to be interested. We've approached them through a number of channels. We've approached the state through a number of channels. Likewise, they haven't come back and said, gee, this sounds like it's interesting at least. Tell me more. They don't come back for a conversation. They don't even come back with questions. So we're at the point now where we're just going to keep pushing and pushing because we believe strongly that the value of this demonstration project will far, far outweigh the mere $60 million we're looking for the investment of it.
How about, thank you, Rob. Yes. The gentleman behind you. Thank you, perfect.
Derek Grasty. I'm from East San Jose, and they're doing a mass transit right now under construction, connecting the East Ridge Mall to the Alum Rock BART. And one of the things that I've asked all through the project was, what's the ridership? What's that going to look like? And there seems to be no data on who's going to use it, how many people are going to use it, and how effective it would be. Also, it takes a lane off Capitol Expressway on each side. So in the end, is it actually going to help traffic, or is it going to create more traffic? And then there's also the issue of timeline. They've got 4 years to do this project. They started 24, and their projected completion is 28. And I've asked numerous times, because I drive by all the time, I see few people working, some days, Sundays, or even Saturdays, nobody working at all. And I ask, where are the workers? Where are the people doing this? Because they can have, without even overtime, you can have shifts Monday through Friday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, and keep the project moving. And I always get, well, it's on time, it's on schedule. But if you're 4 years out, you can not have anybody working for 3 months and say, yeah, we're on time, on schedule. So all those are questions that come up. And then, of course, in the end, is it going to be worth it? What are we getting out of it as a consumer, as a taxpayer?
Absolutely, yeah. All good questions.
And I'm sure the VTA would answer that you're getting a connection between East Ridge and BART. East Ridge, which is a big transit hub itself, and BART, which is another big transit hub.
And that's a high-density area, that the whole east
Right.
side. It's just really overpopulated in a lot of
And it's a lower income, which generally tends to use transit more than private automobiles. So there may actually be a more reasonable payoff there, but it's still, we're talking 250 million per linear mile kind of a thing.
4 years out, that just,
Well, it takes time to build that stuff. Even with PRT, it'll take time to build it.
wow. Whoops. Carol, okay.
Kishore Kumar, quick question. You said 60 million for the demonstration side, right? Did we ever reach out to the corporations here for their CSR funds and try to see if we can actually get some of those? Because there are a lot of big companies out here, and their CSRs typically is into hundreds of millions of dollars.
So you're asking if some of the corporations in the area might be interested in investing in a transit system? Color me skeptical. I haven't tried that. But my experience with corporations is they're not generally interested in the general welfare. They're more interested in their own personal bottom lines. That would be, I'm actually approaching it in a slightly different way in that we're going to need easements to put in our system. And that means particularly from some private property owners, specifically the Great Mall. We're thinking about dropping 2 stations there. So once we've got enough support for the project, whether that's political support or financial support, that's when we'll probably be approaching the management at the Great Mall and saying, look, we would like to put 2 stations on your property and get easements from you, and we don't want to pay you anything, and we don't want you to pay us anything. Would you be interested in having essentially a non-stop connection to 2 stops on your property from these 7 different housing areas and from this BART station that's literally across the, quote, street, which is, at that point about 12 lanes wide. But I'm anticipating, and this is actually not only from just the logic of it, but the fact that I've also talked to one of the Marriott. They've got a couple of spots there that are just off the edge of the Great Mall, and spoke with them and say, hey, what do you think about us using some of your property behind your, back there behind your buildings to put in our transit system? And we'll have a stop over here at the Great Mall which means, anybody that wanted to come to your residences here, your overnight or your long-term stay residences, they would actually have to walk that 200 or 300 yards from the station over to your property. Does that sound like something you'd be willing to grant the easements for? And the guy said yes. So, and I've talked to another property owner, Flextronics property owner, and they seem to be also open to it. The actual Flextronics security guy, and this was half a dozen years ago at least, he was not real keen on having anything going over his property. You know how some folks are, especially security guys. But the point being that I think that there's enough value added that we should be able to get easements from the property owners that we need to get easements from, just by saying, hey, here's the value to you and your organization by having this additional transit. And oh, by the way, the federal government says that when you add transit infrastructure, property values go up substantially. I figured, 5–10%. The federal government says it can reach 30%. Now, I'm not anticipating that we're going to get those kind of numbers here, but even 10% on property values locally would be a big deal, and it would add money to the city coffers from
Incentivize
taxes.
others, yeah. Good job. Okay, Rob. Well, I'm glad you're ever the optimist in this whole development project, because it really does need a good champion like you and others. It takes a village, as I said earlier. Did we hear from everybody here that would like to speak about the subject of, sir, would you like to? Please.
I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'm just thinking, I've just read this book, Paved Paradise, all about parking. And, how much parking do you need for a mall? Paved, like pavement, paved, paradise. And I'm just thinking, I just feel like great malls should be paying you to replace some of their parking spaces with a system that can bring people without bringing the congestion in the parking lot. Because, has anyone gone to the mall around Christmas time and tried to park a car? It's
Or Christmas.
Just think how many more people would come to the stores if they had a way to get there without parking their cars. And, I don't know, the BART system is kind of the opposite paradigm of if you put in a station, you have to put in 4 levels of parking so that people can park right on BART. But this system, talking about, stations spread out all around town, is kind of the opposite, at least in my vision, that people can walk to the station instead of driving to the station. And anyway, I'm just thinking about that. The other thing that I think would be really helpful is actual studies with respected consultants to say, what is the ridership, the projected ridership of your system compared to the projected ridership of the 4 stations that BART wants, the proposed system for the $8 billion or whatever. I think some of the consultants may be biased, but I think if you find a consultant that's not biased, I think you'll get some really supportive data that says that your system will attract more riders than the BART, because it's easier to use.
I think that's a great idea to actually have some kind of a comparison like that. Now, there have been a dozen studies that indicated that ridership of public transit would go up dramatically, and we're talking 2, 3, 4, 5 times the initial ridership when you add PRT to the mix. So I think your point that the great malls should be paying us to put in the stations is reasonable, but at this point in the game, I just want to get my easements so I can build a system, and I'm willing to give away a lot of value at this point to get the system up and running. Bob, you look like you've got something.
Yeah, and because after all that, I gave you a solution who I think is the best 2 places to do this, if we're going to use Las Vegas as an example. So you want, and you're working on easements, so it has to be a city that's under construction, okay? And there's only very few cities around here that's under construction. It's near you, my friend. And I told him that I believe Marina, which is near Monterey, because you need several partners. Since that'll be the new University of California campus, as they're upgrading that from a CSU to a UC, it will have your students. And they love their beaches, and they want, this is an area that wants a lot of tourism, but not a lot of cars. And they only have really one road, and that's Highway 1. And we know that the new Silicon Valley, as they call it, agri-tech, is moving into Watsonville, Salinas, because that's where the high technology food and all the food companies are going, right? Because that's the so I believe, and since we're moving from a 3-airport system to a 5-airport system, where they'll be expanding the Santa Rosa Airport and the Monterey Airport, I believe that you have the ability, you know, and since it's a city under construction, this is where your easements can be easier. And I believe by your university there, since that's where the Mineta Transportation Department's going to be headquartered, so you have that along with the aquarium, and these people don't want you going into Monterey, but they want to go to Monterey. So that's right. So it's the same way with Vegas, right? So and it may be a way to circle around. And that's my other. And the other, of course, is when I said about the airport, the Santa Rosa area too is under that same concept of they're trying to grow. They don't have it yet, but their airport is further along to grow. And so, and they're under transportation. I mean, because that's the one area where, their mass transit agencies don't really go out that far. So that's just my 2 examples. I think the problem you have in Milpitas is that everything's developed here. So you're always going to be irritating a property owner, which is going to be extremely expensive, and the lawyers and everybody else it's going to slow it up. It's just a mess. So, as you already know. And then you'll spend more money on the lawyers than anything else, and that's not a good plan. So there you go, Rob.
Thank you.
So you kind of skipped over that part where I think I'm adding so much more value to their property that they'd actually give me an easement. Say, Steve, have you had a chance to contact anybody in Marina yet? Not okay. Gotcha. Yeah, and we will be following up, definitely.
Very good. Okay, to keep us on our agenda, we're at the 7:40 mark, and converge on new agreements. Do we have that?
I would like to propose one.
Okay, very good. Please, Rob, take it away.
So, given that PRT actually has the potential of being profitable, of providing the kind of service that users are looking for, finding out whether it would work or not seems like a high-value question. And so we believe that the pre-development work for the Milpitas dual-loop PRT system, the pre-development work, which is basically the final design, the engineering, and permitting, which would include finding the easements, that will give us just a big pile of information. It'll get us right into the ballpark of what the cost, the real cost would be. I've been using a number for years that hasn't moved. I haven't been willing to move it because I don't know which direction to move it to. Because is the cost of raw materials rising faster and labor rising faster than the cost of electronics is dropping? Because we've got a computer-controlled system here. It's kind of like the internet, only we're moving real physical things around a network. And I frankly don't know whether the 15 million per one-way guideway line is a real number still, or whether that number should be 20 million or 40 million. I still believe whatever it's going to wind up being is going to be a lot cheaper than either the light rail or the BART. And it can perform better in both cases. So let's invest that first $6 million. And I'm just using a rule of thumb kind of a thing here, where about 10% of any particular project usually goes into that pre-development work. Now, that may not be true with the BART underground borough extension, but that's kind of a rule of thumb that I've been using. So for a $60 million project, we figure $6 million should get us the answers to a lot of our questions.
Okay, and then from that point to actual pods, actual PRTs, what's that time frame?
From having the pre-development work to actually have an operating system, Probably in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 years.
So a little less than the Alum Rock
Right.
Eastridge connection.
It would be less than that, probably significantly less. So they're talking 4 years, we're talking 2 to 3 years, and that's significantly less than 4. So, yeah.
Okay. Good.
That $60 million or the $6 million includes which?
The 2 to 3 years, does that include getting the cars built?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, whole thing. So if you look on our website, you're going to see a red PRT cab and a short piece of guideway. That was actually done on time, on schedule, under budget in Minnesota for the Minnesota State Fair back in 2010, I believe, 2012, somewhere. You know, it's been, over 10 years now. So we've had, an example of where somebody actually tried to do it. They did it within 6 months to get the vehicle and that chunk of guideway designed and built and transported to the Minnesota Fair so people could ride on it for several weeks. And they loved it. Are there any other? So that's the agreement that I would like to see people come to, but hey, I'm just throwing it out there as an option. Has
Well-
anybody got anything else to say?
Yeah. Open. Thank you for coming. Okay, question, yeah, or comment.
Since mainly for the streaming audience, I want to dump on mass transit a little more. And again, we have to stop building mass transit so that we can then start building something that makes sense. But if you're an environmentalist at all, look at the energy consumption per passenger mile for mass transit and compare it to what PRT could do. It's not even close, right? PRT is even better than private autos. So if you compare private autos to mass transit, you've got these 40-foot buses that carry 52 passengers. Theoretically, that's their capacity. How many do you actually have? They're driven by a big diesel engine. They get about 4.5 miles per gallon. So unless you got that thing crammed full, you're not doing very good. So the personal automobile is not all that great, but at least CAFE's been working for years, and they're up to now. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory does a study every year, and they claim that we know what the new vehicles get, because that's the CAFE, but new vehicles go into a mix of the existing almost 300 million vehicles that we already have. So as a fleet of 300 million vehicles, how much do we spend? Oak Ridge National Laboratory does an estimate of that every year. So they're saying we're about 26 miles per gallon. And if you put 1.2 people in that car, which is on average what we carry around, you wind up with something that's like 30 miles per passenger mile, or 30 passenger miles per gallon of gas. Unless you have in a bus at least 14 to 15, somewhere in between those, riders, for every mile that vehicle rolls, which we don't have, then actually cars are more energy efficient than buses. Now rail is better because of the rolling resistance of the steel wheels on steel rails, but they're also bigger, so they have more aerodynamic pressure on the front. So it gets a lot more complicated, but the same basic trend applies. You've got this big vehicle which has big engines that are not particularly efficient. They're pushing a lot of air out of the way, so they aren't really efficient on a per mile basis. You gain that back by filling them up with passengers. So if they're not filled with passengers, they're not helping. Now the worst thing about mass transit, that's manually driven, large vehicles used in shared ride fashion, following a fixed route according to a fixed schedule. It's that last part that kills us, the fixed schedule. How many riders do you need for that thing to roll? 0. It's going to roll on its schedule regardless. So unless you've got riders riding all day, even if for a portion of the day it does pretty well, most of the day, evening and off hours and stuff, you've got empty vehicles rolling around just wasting energy. So a on-demand system is the only system that makes sense in a world threatened by climate change.
Does that go for long distance? Like say someone does have a job on the east side and they want to get to Palo Alto where they're working, and they want to take the bus, or maybe two buses, an express bus and one bus that takes them to downtown. They get the express bus to Palo Alto. Does that same philosophy apply?
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter whether you got a bus, a train, whatever. If you've got a
distance.
large vehicle, which you have in order to have shared rides, right? Because you think that's going to get you efficiency. And then because it's a shared ride, the only way to manage it, effectively is according to a fixed schedule. Then the thing's going to roll on that schedule. And if nobody's going right now, it goes anyway and wastes all the energy.
Right.
Right? An on-demand system, on the other hand, even if they go in separate vehicles, if there's nobody going anywhere, there's no energy being spent.
Right.
So an on-demand system in a world of climate change is the only thing that makes sense.
Rob, what say you? Oh, Carol?
My knowledge isn't quite the same as the technical people here. But I want to say that in defense of public transit, I have had the best experiences and the most joy in my life when I'm using public transit, because my life is easier and I do enjoy it and love it. With that said, I would support this project I've heard the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Right.
And it makes me question VTA very deeply. And I would say that they have a delusion, and they just can't stop doing what they're doing. And I feel very sorry for them because they're not getting it done, and they're spending a lot of money, and there must be a mismatch with their integrity and their intention. I think it's very sad. I don't know how to make VTA see something like that and look for an alternative. And I don't know if PRT is the alternative. But as far as sorry.
She's our timekeeper. Thank
It's
you.
your phone. The idea that they might be able to fund something like this would be a good idea. I just think that the delusion has to be addressed. And I don't know how to really do that. But spending that much money, I don't want them to do that. I vote no, no, no.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol.
So it sounds like an agreement that you would like folks to group around is to not spend $12 billion on the BART underground extension. Okay. I could agree with that. Okay. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't have the ecological value which we really need in a climate crisis world.
Well, it was what Steve was saying when he said those buses are running no matter what, even if they're empty. That's a complete waste. It is nonsensical. It makes no sense. In this world, I mean, it's like, okay, you're going to drive your car. I mean, somebody's going to drive your car just to drive it. I mean, you're going to turn the lights on just to have the lights go on. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. So, that's all.
Thank you.
Steve was talking about the efficiency of PRT technology because it's a demand, on-demand
On-demand.
technology.
Makes sense,
Um,
of course, yeah.
And that is certainly a big chunk of what we're talking about, and he also talks about wind resistance and whatnot. But there's also the stop-and-go nature of mass transit, which does not exist for PRT. And there's also just, now we do have the rail systems, and that's a steel wheel on steel rail, and there's very low resistance. But he's right, if it's a big vehicle that's not terribly aerodynamic, then you're, I guess I go back to my bicycle days when I found out that rolling resistance is just a real small portion of what's going on. The main thing is pushing air out of the way. Once you get to 20 miles per hour, most of the energy you're putting out there is pushing air out of the way. So with the PRT systems, you don't stop and go, and you've got a small vehicle, so you're just pushing small chunks of air out of the way. And you're not going all that fast. Generally speaking, we're running in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 miles per hour. So there's a lot of things that add up. And in our particular technology, yeah, we're using rubber tires, but we're not putting it on a rough asphalt surface. We're putting it on a smooth steel surface. And again, it reduces the rolling resistance, and it just makes it more efficient. So for those that are interested in the environment and reducing the energy use to move folks around, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's good that we have this conversation because it does need to be said, and we need to introduce more people to the concept. And I think once people get very comfortable with it and they start championing it in their own way, whatever that means, emailing people, making phone calls, talking to other people, going on YouTube, seeing how they can make a difference. Showing up at a monthly VTA meeting. Thank you, Steve. All of that counts. This is your baby. This is your demonstration project. This was your great idea. So in terms of having this meeting and talking about the BART-Caltrain connection and how it reflects with your PRT demonstration model or project, how do you want to wrap it up? Rob. Back to Rob.
I expected, there'd be more folks in this conversation to say how to wrap it up. It seems that there is a concurrence that the BART borough is just too doggone expensive. Essentially, the return on investment, it doesn't really matter so much how expensive something is, it's what you get for your money. And we're getting 4 stations that are deep underground, and it's just, they used to talk about 55,000 people a day using that 6-mile stretch. I think they've dropped that number from 55,000 down to 50,000 after the COVID and after we've realized that, well, geez, we don't have all these buildings downtown being as occupied and other people, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
So there's not a huge demand for that particular solution to connecting the 2 stations. So the ROI, the return on investment, just is too doggone low to justify it. And I think that this group is probably in agreement that that's not a good idea. Then you come to, okay, well, what would be a better idea? And like I said, I think a better idea would be to invest $6 million in doing some of the preliminary work on the project here in Milpitas. And I'm seeing some head nodding going on around here. Is there anything else that people would like to contribute to this conversation at this point?
With the PRT work, that's on the Dumbarton Bridge. That's the reason why I came today, because when I was talking with the mayors of both Fremont and Newark, and then also talking to congressional candidates over in Redwood City and Belmont, and I said, well, if we believe the Dumbarton Bridge is the most important mass transit system to work on in the Bay Area, and the money can come from the most wasteful program in the Bay Area, which is the high-speed rail. So just take the money from the high-speed rail, send it over to the Dumbarton Bridge, and put the PRT over there, and that works, because you already have a right-of-way and it's in place. So you're not going to have to do a new right-of-way. And if people incensed, one of the stops would be at the Facebook campus, that would be, you know, they're gonna eat that up. Zuckerberg will, I'm sure, will love to put some of his bucks in there and a lot of his support in there. And Mr. Tesla, our biggest employer in Fremont, will want to have something help in that regard, especially since they're talking about their battery-operated things. You know, so I think if you get some people lined up, but so what you should be doing is put your muscle behind, stop the high-speed rail, you got the money, send it over to the Dumbarton Ridge Rideway Project, and put your PRT there.
I totally agree that PRT could make that connection. And if there's enough demand, you may want to go to larger vehicles, which would be a group rapid transit. But either way, we're talking about an automated system. We're not putting, yep.
At certain times of the day, that bridge is totally full, and other times it's modestly full. But the point is that you could solve a lot of problems that have already been in place, because right-of-ways exist, and they're going away. Because, I mean, the tug-of-war we have with some of our environmental groups in that area, as soon as that bridge falls down, it can't be rebuilt. So they've been working, we have a lot of people trying to keep it functioning so that you can actually do the right-of-way across the water. But that would work. And I mean, of all the things, I think that would be your best bet. And that's my 2 cents worth, and there you go.
I wonder, would that apply to all bridges or all already existing structures like the Golden Gate Bridge and
Well, this one, what's unique about Dumbarton is I'm referring, if you just go out to the Don Edwards Center, which is a wonderful place to spend some nature time too, by the way. And you'll see the rickety old train track that used to have the freight line. And it's still people run on it, you know, they jog on it or something, you know, or ride their bikes across it, just because they don't want, but that's the right of way there, and it could easily be, you know, upgraded, and
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Oh, it's a track. It's
the old railroad
The
track
old railroad
itself
track.
is there. That's the right of way.
Oh.
And so and people actually will probably like looking at the ducks occasionally as they sit by, you know, and so, you know, and the mallards, you know.
Yeah.
But it's your best shot. That's all I'm telling you.
Okay. Thank you. Rob?
He's suggesting the.
Comment
Okay.
over here?
I'll get to Brett in just a second.
Okay.
So he's recommending that we do the Dumbarton crossing. And, you know, the engineer in me who says, you know, a really good engineering solution not only solves the problem you're looking at, but it helps solve some of the other problems that are around it. And clearly what Bob is suggesting is if we had that connector and it worked well, it would take load off of so many other places down here in the South Bay. So that's a great idea. Brett?
Well, sorry. I'm just thinking another, I think this idea of the BART-Caltrain connector is another one that could get support very quickly, as, you know, it's so much cheaper. I mean, I'm not talking about the 80 stations. I'm talking about what you have here on the sheet, is that a one-for-one replacement by PRT for the BART borough would be 180 million and still provide the needed capacity. I feel like that's worth studying as something that might get community support faster than something around the Great Mall, just because I think there's tremendous demand in the community for a connector between Caltrain and BART already. And the magic would be convincing people that this solution works.
VTA would say we already have a solution for that. We're running buses. And well, you know, they have short headways. You know, they've got it down to about 10 or 11 minutes between vehicles. So it's actually a reasonable solution that they're offering right now. But your point, you know, is well taken. Yeah, if you could raise awareness and interest in that area, yeah, it might actually work out easier than doing what we're trying to do in Milpitas. But the time required to get the public behind a project is extensive. from my experience anyway. And I'm thinking that the fact that we've been already working on the Milpitas community for 5 years is, kind of gives us a leg up. Plus, we're talking about something relatively small and probably with an even higher ROI than what you're suggesting, getting those two stations connected, especially since there's already something connecting those two. So I don't know, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm working on. If somebody wants some help in doing that particular project, I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, very good. I know, it's a tremendous idea. Okay, thank you. We are at time. We want to thank Rob, do I have your permission to close?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We want to thank everyone for attending and for participating. It was really great to have you here. The subject, of course, is ongoing. You can always reach Rob. Is it info@milpitasprt.com? Okay, good. And give him your additional comments or feedback or anything else that you have to say on the subject. We're always open for that. We want to thank Social Ground Foundation. Thank you to Elise and Tim. Good job. Good job, guys. Thank you so much. They are making it possible to have this up on YouTube. And that's exciting. And you can see it at youtube.com/@MilpitasPRT. So you can go and look at it later, and you can see yourself, and that would be cool. Thank you again. I can't thank you enough for being here. Do we have any final comments, Rob or Carol?
Well, Carol pointed out that we ought to be thanking you, Belinda.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And you're from KCXU?
KCXU Radio. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Hello, everybody out there. Yeah, and I am not a source matter expert, but I'm so happy to have met you, to interviewed you on the radio a couple of months ago, and that's how we met, and that's how I got wrapped up into. I just was very curious about this project, and I thought, this is outstanding. This is what we need. I'm so glad you're thinking out of the box and so innovative, and I'm just happy that I did my little part today. So thanks to everybody again for being here, and we will close with that.